Looks like we're just about live. Just going to double check we're all rock and roll here. And we're live. Keep going. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm sitting here with the cellar master of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, Andrew Derbidge, and myself, Matt Bailey. I'm sitting with myself. The way I phrased that could have been a whole lot better. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and being a part of the virtual live that I promised that we'd be doing as part of the gathering packs that we had. Something really special for our members to do. For those who want to rewind to about September last year, we did go live actually back then with these packs, and it was a lot of fun. So good evening to Tim Steens, Scott Brickhill, Nick Husek. Hello, everyone who's tuning in. This is fantastic. And we're getting a bit of feedback. Sorry, that's my fault, actually. Here we go. Cool. Whiskey celebrities. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Tim. I think that one must apply to Andrew. I'm just here to drink whiskey. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to kill that music off, and I'm going to admit a few people into the live stream on Zoom in just a moment. But in the meantime, hello. We're keeping a good distance here.
We are.
We're not even sharing glassware, because you normally do, right?
Well, we normally share that straw.
Yeah. We normally share. It's called a whiskey straw. Yeah.
There's a strange perspective here, but that is actually 1.5 meters.
Yeah, no, the perspective is a bit out of whack. It's all right. Yeah. Rob Akers, Fiona Beasley, El Tote, Zeno Davidoff, Yo-Ho, says Matthew Adams. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to try and greet everyone who comes in. We're going to talk a bit about whiskey. We're going to taste through the whiskeys in the gathering pack. And I hope if you don't already have it, there is a gathering tasting mat that you can download. I think we sent that to everyone who had the pack. So that's there now if you need it. And it's on our group as well. And we're going to taste through some whiskey. Oh, we're not just going to talk all night, I promise. And we're going to admit some people into the Zoom room to ask some questions as well if they want. So I might do that in just a moment. But how you been?
I've been really well. In these trying, troubling times.
Yeah, they are enigmatic times for sure. It's certainly strange. And the way I look at it is that it's something that Scotty once said. Scott from the Oak Barrel once said to me was that would we be doing this in normal times? And we did. We have.
I think that's something that's a lot of industries and businesses are looking at. This has changed the way we do business and the way we do things. And when the dust settles and life returns to some sort of normality, how many of these things are we going to keep up? These behaviours and patterns. And are we still going to avoid one another if you walk through shops and who knows?
I quite like that gap at the shopping centres.
It's all right, isn't it?
I think I can get used to that one.
Yeah.
So if everyone who bought the pack has one in front of them right now, I'm seeing a lot of members already posting on our group of their setup, of their layout. It's awesome. Like I said, got some giveaways to go through tonight. I'm going to give some samples out to the best looking setups and or at least some of the most unique. They're surely more than unique than mine because I've got one glass to work with right now. So that's exciting. So here we go. Why don't we open some
what on earth is going on here?
I think that's an old one. Just keep going down, maybe.
I did.
Is that it? There it is. Here we go.
Right, there we go. Technology.
Yeah, we got there. You know what? We're doing pretty well. We've got. I think it looks like 11 people on YouTube. We've got 30 on our group, which is fantastic. Ready and willing, says Ian Scott. Zoom, says Mark Garraway. Yes, we're going to let some people into the Zoom in just a moment, Mark. So we'll kick that off in just a moment. So everyone who wants to jump in, we'll do that now. We're going to admit people into the Zoom, see if they want to join in and ask some questions. We're going to go. We're going to keep it as a. We're going to spotlight that. We're going to pin that one there. Cool.
If anyone's watching on the page as opposed to the group, feel free just to put a comment so that it can show up on my screen here and we can see that things are actually coming through. Thank you, Mr. Finnegan. That was a fast response. Cheers, mate.
Good evening. Okay, so great to see some people coming in. We're going to admit a few more into that. That's great. So why don't we go ahead and we'll have a chat first dram, and you can follow along on Zoom, or you can follow along on our Facebook group. Where should we start?
Well, I like to start at the beginning personally.
Okay. You can pick one.
I can pick one?
Yeah. I mean, just be aware for those playing at home. The packs come in a bit of an assortment order. That's how they were packed. Doesn't mean it's the best way to drink them. AKA, I do not recommend starting with the 33.
No.
Well,
look, we've got the top left up here, and on your tasting mat, if you've got it, top left is the light and delicate flavour profile, and 64.108 should be the whiskey in your pack, and I reckon that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think it is. Okay.
64.108. This is a 10-year-old whiskey, a single malt from a distillery that's up in Speyside. Now, I made a promise to myself tonight that we were going to try and get through this without mentioning the distillery names.
Hey, okay.
Well, we were going to try and honour the society's code.
Yeah, I can get that.
And stick with it. So, this one here, that's so tasty.
I know how to mention it without mentioning it for
Really?
this one. This is the only society code where the distillery rhymes with the number.
Well, that's obscure. Do I have to go through 134 numbers to try and prove you wrong? Or
you're welcome to.
Wow. Okay. I'll take your word for it. I'm okay with that.
Can you think of any other distillery that rhymes with the number?
At the risk of boring our viewers whilst I think about it, no. So, yes, this is a distillery in Speyside, a distillery that was established and built in the early 1970s, if I remember. I want to say 1971.
Yeah.
On the back of another distillery called Glenelgan. So if you can find Glenelgan, you'll find this distillery right next door to it. It's all on the one plant and facility. It's also got a dark grains processing plant. I paid a visit to this place in 2014. Stuck my head in the door and said g'day to the crew there. And it's a distillery that deliberately sets out to make a light style of spirit, and it's a lighter style of whiskey. And surprise, surprise, this ends up in our light and delicate flavour profile.
Yeah. We don't see too many casks in the light and delicate.
True.
We see a fair few sweet fruity mellows and peated and whatnot, but I think light and delicate is a little bit underrated because it's how do you get light and delicate and cask strength in one hit?
Yeah. I think also you got to put yourself in the eyes and the palate of the tasting panel, who are always looking to be impressed and blown away by something. And it stands to reason that whiskies that are louder and more vibrant will get your attention more. And so it shouldn't surprise us that, the quieter whiskies that are a bit more delicate and subtle and need a bit more time probably don't stand out to the tasting panel as much as the others. So I guess what I'm saying is that you might potentially have to work harder as a whiskey to impress a tasting panel in order to certainly to wear the society's badge. And just nosing that right now, it's just that lovely light style of Speyside whiskey. A little bit of fruit, some soft grassiness, very outdoor, touch of floral, but delicate and subtle along the way. Certainly not a big bruiser of a dram.
This is the kind of whiskey for me that would be like the ultimate Sunday lunch dram. Something for the weekend. It's got that, that light and delicate sort of you don't need a big bruiser of a whiskey.
Yeah. Hey, I'm getting some insights here. I think Matt's Sundays are very different to mine. But,
some are.
Yeah, I'd be having a Lefroy at about this time on Sunday. But,
what world do you live in?
Ireland, obviously. That is lovely. I'm really enjoying that. Good to renew acquaintances with this dram. Of course, we've tried this previously. I'll tell you what I love about this dram. It's a whiskey where the palate delivers a lot more than the nose set you up for. Nosing this, it was very light, very delicate, soft and fruity, as I explained, but then you taste it and all of a sudden, bang, you're getting flavour.
Yeah.
Sweet, rich, malty flavour too. There's a good malty.
I mean, it's had 10 years. No.
True.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's a 6 or 7 year old whiskey. It's certainly had some time.
And interestingly, and we're seeing a lot more of this in the society. We're seeing a lot of whiskies getting bottled that are north of 60% alcohol, ABV.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. The industry worked out about 10 to 12 years ago that it's very expensive to mature water. And so they started filling their casks at higher strengths, casking strength, as the term goes. And so, after 10 years, this is 61%. I dare say, had we been doing this a while ago, this would be coming in at about 57, 58% as a 10-year-old. But at 61%, it's very soft, isn't it? It's not coming across as an aggressive, high alcohol drink.
I really like
For
that
me,
nose.
personally,
I love that nose on it. It's so creamy. The nose is so creamy and so I don't know, just so balanced. It's that classic Speyside nose, though, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that classic sort of like floral kind of Speyside nose, which I love. Very versatile story, though. We've had a bunch of 64s. Some have been quite old, and some have been quite young. And they work. It's one of those distilleries that seems to work at all age ranges.
Yes.
You know how some distilleries, I've talked about this before. I mean, some distilleries I find have a sweet spot. They excel at certain ages. I've been outspoken on that in different occasions. But I think that's, I honestly think that, like I said before, I think this is one of those distilleries that excels at young, old, and everywhere in between. I've had some 7-8-year-old casks from the distillery and some 28, 30-year-old casks from the distillery, and they're magical in just their own way each way.
What I think is also great about this distillery and being able to taste it is it's not a distillery you're going to come by very often. It did not have a commercial release, an official bottling as such. It became infamous for a release that went out in the late 90s, early 2000s called Lock Do, which came from this distillery. But the only official bottling for many, many years was the Flora and Fauna bottling.
Yeah.
So not one that you would pick up at your local bottle shop. So it was a distillery that you really only got to experience through the independent bottlers, and the society's obviously been a big champion of it, particularly after 108 casks. And I know we're into the what was the last one from here? 113 we got up to, I think.
114. Yeah.
114. Yeah. So as I said, a rare treat. And we shouldn't forget that. There's a lot of stuff coming through the society at the moment, some great bottlings. Sometimes you just got to think for a second, hang on, I'm actually tasting something that most whiskey drinkers don't get a chance to taste. Yeah. It's not out there. It's not a regularly available whiskey.
Those are some of the most exciting bottlings for me now that we see at the society. You know, the ones that don't have a core range, because then I get to explore the profile and character of that distillery and that distillate that you wouldn't normally get to. It's like, but at the same time, I also love tasting single casks from distilleries where there's a huge or prolific core range, because then it's like, well, this is something totally unique away from the core range. It's like a distillery that maybe like a distillery that produces mostly sherry whiskey, then we get a bourbon cask from it.
Yeah,
that's exciting for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. James Finnegan's just saying here he's added some water, and I like. And you know what? I would not surprise me. I reckon this whiskey probably could take some water. Thank you, James.
Joe Rinaldi says Distillery 64 is very close to Distillery 12 for me. Okay, that's very interesting. We've had a string of Distillery 12 casks. Those, and all but two have been mostly, I think, first fill bourbon barrels, and they have that lovely rich sweetness from that first fill cask, and they've all been sort of that younger first fills, 10, 11, 12-year-old casks, which have been great. Tim Steens also says it smells almost like a white wine.
Add some more.
Yeah, right. I'm going to add a bit of water to that. I'm going to also do a big shout out to everyone who's joined in via Zoom and tasting live with us tonight. So big shout out to everyone in here. I won't name everyone, but I can see Dave Phillips and Dom Arcaro and Cal and everyone, and Mark Garraway and Iona. Good to see you all.
Thumbs up, yeah.
I really appreciate you all tuning in. It feels like we're actually at a real tasting with you at the moment, which is fantastic. So, the link, of course, for those who do have a pack is on our Facebook group, which you can catch, which I posted a bit earlier today. So Fiona asks, is it Teen Innick?
Thanks for the tip with the water, James. That has worked a treat. I agree.
It is a bit white winish with the water, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like an old Riesling.
A nice white wine, though.
Yeah, nice
exactly. A Riesling, yeah.
It's because they're sweet, and I think there's a sweet note that comes out of that once you take it out. Once a few drops of water, yeah. Matthew Adams says, 1 drop of water, a lovely floral finish.
Well, a lot of comments over there. We're having fun tonight. I'm seeing the comments from the group over that side,
Comments this side,
and the page on that side. So if you see us sort of looking in that direction, you'll know.
Doing a bit of this, yeah. No, Fiona, it is not Teeninic, but I don't know if the code for Teeninic rhymes with Teeninic either. So that might be a bit of a tough one. So we'll see how we go there. Rob Akers says it starts with M. Yeah, we haven't actually said that it's the name.
Well, I said
we haven't said It sits across the road from. Here's another one.
Much more than that.
Road from 46.
I watched it on Facebook. They can't see me coming.
You know, the other one I love in that is the 13.
I look on Facebook. They can't see me.
Okay.
Both White and Mackay.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know how.
You can see that you're watching.
Yeah.
It's a
Kind of.
Yeah, they said they can see that you're watching.
10.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they are aware that I am watching?
No.
They can see me.
Aware.
Side of me working now.
You're going to have to work on that.
Bastard.
Bob Wenting says, good morning. Not tasting here in the Netherlands, but enjoying the live cast. Good to see you, Bob. Always a pleasure. I must go. Love you guys, says Fiona. That's okay, Fiona. We'll see you soon. Fantastic. A big woohoo from Todd Charblow. Good to see you, Todd.
Got your message today, Todd, by the way. Cheers, mate.
So a question from Dave Phillips. He says, is Glenlossie on the same site? It's just up the road.
It's not far.
It's not far. It's kind of, they're not on the same street, but they're sort of, it's like a triangle shaped site, and Glenlossie's at the top end and Manickmore's down the bottom.
Hang on, sorry, beg your pardon. I'm getting my yes. The answer is yes, it is.
Yeah, on the same site. Yeah.
I had a Glen Elgin moment. I said Glen Elgin's
the other way. Yeah.
Glenlossie and this distillery, yes, are on the same site. Literally, the distance between the production area for Glenlossie and the production area for this one is about 12 metres, 10 or 12 metres. The buildings are back to back. Also, as I said, there's a dark range site there as well.
There is a dark range site. That's correct. Yeah, which I think is between the two.
Off to the other side, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you walk up the main road, and the distillery is on the left, and the processing plant's on.
There you go. Okay.
Other side.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. Well, I mean, great comments coming through. Of course, we're accepting questions tonight, taking your comments, taking your questions. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Good to see lots of people tuning in live with us on Zoom as well, and more people joining, of course, which is fantastic. So, says Matt is disqualified. I'll take that as a comment, Mark. I'm sure I am. Go for it.
I got a comment from Tim here. Other voices coming through in the stream for anyone else?
Yes.
There's a couple of people live who have got a bit of feedback on their mic, so I might just mute that and see how we go. It's all right. As long as you can hear us mostly, we're okay. Okay. Here we go. Matt, you said it. Did I say it? Did I say the word? I don't think I did.
I don't think you did.
I don't know. I'm getting. Matt just said the distillery. 2 people have said that.
You did, Matty.
I said Glenlossie.
No, you also said Manickmore.
Okay, I also said Manickmore. I'll take that. That's okay. I did say it.
It's all good.
I'm saying I did.
It's all good.
Strike one.
Strike one. Okay.
I know.
Oh, this is amazing. I really appreciate everyone tuning in tonight, by the way. This is great. This is a chance for us to sit back, have our gathering drams, get together on a Monday night, and as Ian says, MNOHOE, more. Yeah. There we go. I can say it sort of like that. No, it's about the enjoyment of drams, and it's a chance for us to Andrew and I to get together, talk about each one a bit, talk a bit about each distillery a little bit as we did, and talk about some of the drams behind it. So any questions, of course, as we go is always appreciated. And just you can put them in any chat thread and we'll catch it. You've got Zoom chat, you've got group chat, and you've got a Facebook page group chat as well. Where are we up to? Should we look at number 2?
Number 2. Now we had a little bit of to and fro as to which one this should be. Are we still thinking this?
I mean,
because I am.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah. So number 2, for those who are playing along at home, is 44.99, a real cracker in the spicy and dry flavor profile there. Here we go.
Bit more colour on this one.
Bit more colour. It's a bit older as well.
It is.
A refill barrel ex-bourbon. Speyside whiskey from Distillery 44, which is a...
I'm a big fan of this distillery.
I am also a big fan of this distillery.
When I stay in Speyside, I choose to stay in the inn that is just down the road from this place. And one of the few distilleries left that still uses worm tubs for its condensers. And as such, it still produces a very meaty, I'm going to use the word, it's not politically correct, but it's a ballsy whiskey. It's always got some, it's always got some grunt behind it.
Yeah, a bit of grunt.
And we don't want to get too nerdy tonight, but when the distilleries make their spirit, the condensers and the amount of copper contact they have influences how much sulfur gets removed from the spirit. And the moment you say the word sulfur, people get a bit and immediately associate that with the sulfur that you get from sherry casks. We're not talking about that sort of sulfur taint. There is a natural sulfur that's produced during fermentation that comes through in the spirit. And when whiskey is distilled and the spirit is sloshing around inside the stills and going in the line arm and the condensers, the amount of contact you have with copper, the more contact with copper, the more you'll strip those sulfurs out. So because Craig Gallagher, because I'm disqualified.
Oh, he said it.
I said it.
He said it.
So because this distillery uses worm tubs, less copper contact, therefore more sulfur, which produces a meaty spirit. I am so disappointed in myself. The
whole tasting. Really, I'm not going to say any of the distillery names, and then bam,
I'm really disappointed in myself. Well, okay, 1-1.
Yeah, 1-1. My turn. I don't know what distillery this is. I just enjoy. I love 44s because most of the same reason that Andrew does. It's a rich, heavy spirit. It's always got this as you know, it's a meaty characteristic to the spirit, much like you find in Distillery 76, much like you find in Distillery 48. You find these.
To be fair, most of the Diageo distilleries, a good chunk of the Diageo distilleries still use worm tubs.
Yes, a very large chunk of them do, don't they? Yeah, that's true.
They're almost the last bastion.
Yeah. But this is not a Diageo distillery.
But it used to be.
No, I'm just, okay. Just for technicality, you are correct. It used to be. I don't know what year it changed hands, but it wasn't that long ago. Like, it really wasn't like, I'm talking like mid-2000s, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's Bacardi these days, isn't it?
It is, yes. Bacardi Group along in the Dewar's folio. And
it came with Dewar's. So that was early 2000s? Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. I thought it was 02, 03, somewhere around there. Yeah. So this distillery is part of the Bacardi folio. It comes with Dewar's, as Andrew said. So a large chunk of this output goes into Dewar's. And when I say a large chunk, I don't know what percentage that is, but given what most distilleries go for, I'm probably guessing it's around 70, 80% of their output or even more. It'd be a large proportion, and a small portion goes into single malts.
Hey, we've got a comment from Francisca here. I haven't seen you for ages. Good to see you again. Well, you used to be a regular at Sydney Tastings back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely to have a dram with you tonight, Francisca.
Very
Good
cool.
to see you.
Very cool. Some of the comments coming through here. Martin Eber. Good mate.
Martin, hey.
He's liking this 64 a lot more than I did the other day. Yeah, I was actually a standout dram just then. I loved it. And of course, Todd's referencing where you're staying with the inn with over 700 whiskies behind the bar.
No, not that inn. No, the other one across the road.
Oh,
yeah,
the secret inn.
Well, let's know. There's the Craig Gallagher Hotel, and there's the Highlander Inn, and yes. I prefer the Highlander Inn myself. Mind you, also when staying at
the pub grub at the Craig Gallagher is better though.
Ooh, them's fighting words.
Oh yeah,
we shall have to disagree. But also when staying in Speyside, I also like to stay at the Dowlands Hotel. In fact, when the Society does its ultimate whiskey tours to Scotland, we stay at the Dowlands, and that's nearby another distillery that we're going to be coming to very shortly.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's by the by.
Todd says there's no accounting for poor taste, Andrew.
Yes.
Yes.
Just remembered I'm live on air. I've got to be careful what I say.
In the words of Tony Jones, I'll take that as a comment. From Nick Husek says, from memory, the 13-year-old from this distillery has a strong cereal note.
I reckon that 13-year-old that you're referring to, Nicholas, I reckon that is one of the best bang for your buck whiskies you can get at your local bottle shop. What is it, $85 for that 30-year-old, 13-year-old?
$85.90, somewhere around there.
It is such a great drop. And it's been recognised as such as well. And
from the same stable, Altmore 12.
Yes.
I think is a great whiskey.
Yeah.
And Todd says he agrees with that. Yes, good.
I can breathe easy now. I've been affirmed by Todd.
Well, Craig Morton asks, did you have one or two warm-up drams before you started, Andrew?
One or two.
Hey, I copped as much flack for saying the distillery the first time, so it's okay. It's okay. Ian Scott says, interesting to compare the 44 with the 13-year-old commercial bottling. I mean, this is a 14-year-old, so it's obviously in the same ballpark in age statement-wise, but being a single cask, it's utterly unique in its profile compared to otherwise. Yeah. Welcome, Brian, to the Zoom stream. Good to see you.
Oh, this Francisco, your memory is fantastic. 44 for Celebrity Chef Just Dessert. I remember that from 2009. That was a cracker, wasn't it? It's a distillery that I find when the society bottles it, we always seem to find a winner, and as we said, the commercials are fantastic as well. In fact, Mr. Eber's watching. Last time Martin and I caught up in Sydney was the launch of the was it 51 year old?
51, yeah. I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was an interesting drop.
Yeah,
I love the way they did that. The distillery chose to.
There was 51 bottles to the cask as well.
I think I picked up on that subtlety.
Yeah.
But yeah. It was interesting that they chose to share it with people rather than flog it for a fortune. I thought that was very nice. So look, it's a distillery I like. And it's a whiskey I like. This is a great whiskey. There's
a great comment coming through from Mark Garraway. He says he made it to two whiskeys guys before we started saying the distillery names. For your information, doesn't though much experimentation. Distillery 44 pairs amazingly with plain beef sausages from Woolies.
Well, that stands to reason. And any of these distilleries that use worm tub condensers and produce a meaty spirit, we use that term, meaty. So it stands to reason it would go well with beef.
Yeah. It's a beefy dram.
It is.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it, Mortlock, very much in the same boat. Mortlock goes beautifully with red meat.
Balmenic.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah. Love the 48s.
I haven't added water to this. Anyone added water yet? If you've added water and you've got a comment, let us know.
Martin says 100%.
I will. I think that's when we were talking about that popped up earlier.
Jim Chitsos joined and Jess Trochet joined. Good to see you both.
Now, just like the preceding dram we had, I've added a drop of water to that, and it just brings out that lovely fruit again. And more cereal.
Craig Morton asks, why is there a blowtorch on the shelf with the whiskies, gentlemen?
Now, funny you should say that, because I saw exactly that and asked the same question just before we went live. I looked over my shoulder and thought, butane, which is an essential part of any live streamed whiskey event, as you know.
The truth is, as I said to Andrew, I'll reply exactly the same. At some tastings, I have torched barrel staves or barrel heads as a way of showing what the charring or toasting of wood looks like or smells like in the room. Of course, in some of these venues at men's, I've had to ask for them to isolate the fire alarms and whatnot and turn them off, which they don't always oblige. So they have gone off. But that's always fun. But it's just the char barrel samples and stuff to change things up and have a bit of fun with how toasting or charring of wood looks from a distillery standpoint.
Barbara's made a comment here about adding water. Yes, it improved it a lot. I agree. It has. And we don't say that about every dram. I know for a lot of people it's habit to add water. For some, it's even part of their ritual with enjoying whiskey. Doesn't necessarily mean your dram is going to be the better for it. But I think our first two whiskies tonight have actually benefited from a drop of water. Ian Clark here said the same thing. A couple of drops of water improved it for me.
Yeah. So you're not going to cook up a creme brulee. Okay.
Another great reason this is a great whiskey is the finish. That one's actually sticking around for a bit and gets your salivary glands moving and pumping and producing more. Finish is it's the unloved child in whiskey appreciation, isn't it? We focus on the nose, you have your taste and then go, oh, that was great. But you actually got to think about it. There is a finish. Once you swallow, there's so much more that the dram has left to give you. And we overlook it, I think.
Do you think it's, in your opinion, do you think it's like third?
Huh. Good thing Mr. Chapman's not here right now. That is a really good question. God, you've stumped me twice tonight now.
I think it's like 70, 15, 15. Maybe not an extreme, but I think it's like at least 60, 20, 20.
60, 20, 20. I'll join you there. Yeah.
But not for every whiskey. You know what I mean? Like, you know how some whiskeys like are all finish, or like there's like the nose is like, oh, it's a bit closed. The palate is like, that's big. And then the finish is like, oh, that's lasting 20 minutes. And that happens, but it's, it's not always the most enjoyable.
I made a reference then to Mr. Chapman. That's Tony Chapman, who's known to many of you. And Tony was a member of the Society's local tasting panel for a long time. And we used to debate about the merits of nose and palate. And I would get very carried away, as you'd know from many, if you've seen or heard or read what I've said in the past. I have a very good sense of smell and I love nosing whiskies. And Tony made the point, well, we don't buy whiskey to nose it. We buy it to drink it. And therefore palate should be what we focus most on, except that you and I have just said 60, 20, 20 or 70, 70, 15. So we're both putting emphasis on the nose rather than the palate.
For some whiskies, even though, I'd even go so far to say 60, 10, 30.
Yeah, okay.
I find the palate on some of them just like is the afterthought of how good the nose and finish can be. Yeah, I put all the emphasis on the nose though. I still do.
And we've had some Society whiskies that were 40, 40, 40. And I know that doesn't add up. But just think about that. Because they're big. More than 100%.
That's like your 1 + 1 = 3.
No, well, France.
No, that's a different analogy, but it's, yeah. Do I need to teach you what 3 × 40 is? Are you okay?
I'm okay. I know where the numbers got to.
Excellent. Agree with
I think we do this on a Monday night, not a Friday.
It is the beginning of the week. Hello, everyone. Jose says, agree with nose. Good to see you, Jose. I hope you're well. I'm just going to jump a few more people back in here. Here we go. Olfactory stimuli can be amongst the strongest trigger of memories, says Todd.
Absolutely, Todd. And there's a good reason for that. It's because the part of your brain that processes smells is right next to the part of your brain that remembers things, your memory bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a fancy brain word. Is it hippocampus?
Yeah, that's like also the name of a vodka made in Perth.
There you go. I'd remember that. Anyone who's remotely medically qualified, feel free to
want to jump in here, please do.
I think hippocampus is that bit associated with memory, and it's right next to where your brain processes aromas. Martin's made a fantastic point. If you can't smell, you can't taste. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. When I was quite a bit younger, when I was 13 or something, I was getting a lot of nosebleeds. It's just a part of growing up, I guess, or whatever. And the doctor said,
get into fights, did you?
Yeah, got a lot of fights. and a doctor recommended I get my nose cauterized. And he said, oh, there's a chance you'll lose a certain sense of smell. And so I was so worried about losing my sense of smell that I just opted against it, and eventually they went away. But
yeah, right.
Yeah.
You do lose your smell.
Says Mark Garraway, couldn't agree more. That's a proper big spicy. It's got a lot of body, that 44. It's got a lot of chutzpah.
Well, that's a fancy word.
I have 2 psych degrees, but neuropsychology was not one of my strong points. Lol, says Todd. But you got more medical degrees than Andrew and I combined, so that's okay.
Morsey's chimed in here. Speak for yourself, Tony. The nose is where it's at. Sorry, do bear with us as we jump between 3 different streams to get comments from.
You have our full attention, don't worry. But we're jumping through a few different comment streams, and appreciate everyone who's tuned in to join us live and have a dram with us along the way. We're on the second dram at the moment, the 44.99, a real cracker, and I'm just at the tail end of mine at the moment, and that was a lovely whiskey.
Those of you who have access to a keyboard, feel free just to punch something through quickly and say which of our first 2 drams you like the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know.
They're both from Speyside. I'd be keen to see whether you like number 1 or number 2.
I've got 2 questions coming in on the other stream here. Nick Husek here says, with the name, does a cracker refer to a biscuit note or just being a delicious whiskey? I think I might just jump in and say a bit of both. Like that rich biscuity note maybe is coming through a bit for you as well, but it's also a delicious whiskey. And Robert Aker says, Andrew, did you sell off that old bottle of 24 to Muzz that he had on the stream the other night because it was full of sulfur?
No comment.
There we go. That was 24.95 that Murray was enjoying on the stream the other night. That is correct.
Was that the bottle that I gave him? Sold to him, donated to him, something like that.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. It was 24.85 or 24.95.
It was 24.95.
24.95.
Curried sausages and treacle, I think it was.
Yeah, I remember the one. Yeah.
The one?
Nice use of chutzpah, says Mark. Yeah, thank you. Mel Brick says, Dram 2 indeed. Now, Craig Morton, 64.108, while lighter than my usual preference, really like the creamy mouthfeel.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, really good call. I'd agree with that. 64 slightly edges out the 44 for me tonight, but nothing in it. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, Tim has said number 1. Barbara's also said number 1. James has said number 2.
Mark says, to be honest, both very even, both very different. Maybe 44 slightly, and Martin Eva says 44, but only just.
Okay. Madeline, good to see you in the UK. Good to have you chiming in over there.
Hey, Mads, good to see you.
Must be early morning over there, I'm guessing, right now.
Yeah.
Or mid-morning, in fact.
Yeah, the time's closer at the moment.
Have they jumped to daylight saving yet?
Yeah.
Oh, so 9 hours difference.
Yeah, it's like 8 or 9 at the moment. Yeah.
It'll be 9.
9, yeah. Oh, Jose's got 1. We've got a few votes for 2. I think it's pretty balanced between 1 and 2.
Isn't it? Yeah. Split field.
Okay, well, where I recommend going after this, and this is what Andrew and I sort of discussed before we started, is 35.239, Sweet Seduction. A 23-year-old, old and dignified. Of course, you can enjoy this in whatever pace you guys want. Anyone who's following along, if you've got a few glasses, you can just pour it, come back to them, jump around and 2. We're going about 20 minutes a dram at the moment.
Great Distillery 35. Let's try and get through without saying its name.
You know what? We're 1-1 at the moment, so we'll just we'll take it easy.
Just try not to mention Muzz's name again.
64 over the 44 so far, but both very nice. 44 so far. AD frontal lobe is related to smells. Well, there you go.
Okay.
Thanks, Zeno. 64.10, definitely my favorite. This is the 3rd time I've had this in the Gathering tasting pack. You are keen as mustard, Mark. I love it. This is your 3rd Gathering pack. That's awesome. My wife preferred the 44.99. Okay, very cool. Stuart Mountjoy. Stuart, good to see you, mate. Hope you're well. And what a sensational sweet nose that 35 has. We're about to find out. Are there any? Nick Husek asks. Rob Akers says Glenn Bagpipe. Here we go. Nick Husek asks, any members younger than this whiskey? I can tell you because I know the membership quite well. Yes, there is. Actually, I think one of the members who's tuned in right now is. There you go.
He'd be 20?
21?
Oh, 21.
Yeah. Zeno, I think you're 21. You let me know.
You know, once upon a time, I was the youngest member in the society.
You were?
I'm that gospel truth.
Were you like member number 6 or something?
I've told the story. Tonight's not the moment, but the very initial society launched in November 2002 when I walked into the room and instantly brought the average age down by half.
Yeah. No, we've got a couple of members who recently joined, both in Adelaide and Melbourne, who are both 19. So, Zeno, I'm afraid you're not the youngest member, but we do.
Samuel's younger. He's telling us.
Yeah, no, Sam. There you go, Sam. You're a member and you're younger. There you go. You've already said it. There you go. The 35 is a birth year whiskey for me. Oi, Mark, legend.
Always nice drinking a birth year whiskey.
There's something about it, even if
do it now while you can.
Yeah.
Like I could see some people nodding here on the Zoom stream. Some people who are older than me. So yeah, I hear.
Yeah.
Well, that's just stepping into another room, isn't it? You start nosing this, and we're in very different territory to where we've been so far. Still a Speyside whiskey, officially.
It's a totally different beast.
It is
totally different beast. Now, if I recall correctly, you did add water to this last time. We sort of ummed and ahed about it, kind of like. I've said this before, and you'll attest to this. I've always said that young bourbon cask whiskeys appreciate a drop of water. This is my personal preference, of course. Sherry casks I tread carefully, which is code for very, very often I don't.
That's good advice.
I just find that they don't need it. It's a bit like adding water to a cask strength rum. It's kind of like it doesn't actually enhance the experience. It just sort of dilutes it. Same with a lot of sherry cask whiskies. But I find that older whiskies, my general rule of thumb is to never add water. However, we did add water to this last time we tried it, and it held up with a drop. Even it's sitting at 52.9.
To be fair, it's only 23. I say only.
It's got some age on it.
It does, but it's when you get north of 30 that you really wouldn't go near a drop of water. But at 23, there's still potential. Lovely notes of leather on that. Touch of beeswax.
So Todd Shardlow says, sorry, without just mentioning the distillery name, he said, when a fish bites your heel and it looks like an eel, that's amore.
Well done.
Well done.
Very clever.
Very clever indeed.
Thank you, Glenn.
Jose, good to see you, mate. Hope you're well. Fantastic. And Dom Arcaro asks, did Alex Moores choose this one for the pack? Did Alex Moores choose this one? I don't think he did.
Barbara's just made a point here. My auntie Bo would love a dram of this before bed. It has got a slightly potpourri note to it.
It does, yeah.
That is the sort of thing you'd associate with something at bedtime.
I know we're third dram in, and I forgot to mention this, but there is a nice little tasting note kit in your pack. If you want the full tasting notes of each whiskey, I should have mentioned that maybe 40 minutes ago. So you can turn them over and you can read the full details about each tasting note and all the UK tasting panel notes on there. This is 23 years in a first fill ex-bourbon barrel.
It is first fill, is it?
It's first fill. I find that absolutely fascinating that it lasted that distance in a first fill.
Yeah. Well, you say that. We know the quality of the spirit that they make there.
Yeah.
It's going to stand up to wood.
It's going to stand up, yeah.
Tim saying if we get some plum jam on the nose, absolutely. There's definitely some fruit there. Stone fruit, aged fruit, boozy fruit.
Boozy fruit. Oh, Joel says hints of Allen's party mix on the nose.
Oh, the old Allen's party mix. Yeah.
Like open a fresh bag of them.
Another one.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, isn't it? So you're getting that confectionery sweetness, which sooner or later ties back to vanilla, which sooner or later ties back to a first fill bourbon cask in an American oak.
Craig says it's an old scuba diver song, but put your arm in a crack and you can't pull it back. That's amore. Thanks, Craig. We still haven't said the distillery name. I wouldn't know which distillery it is. It is one of my favorite distilleries. I do love.
You do have a soft spot for this.
I do have a soft spot for the 35s, and for this distillery, they have a diversity of spirit character, and especially when it gets into this kind of age bracket, they get this like you said, this lovely potpourri. I agree with the Allen's party mix. It's unbelievable.
Cheers to Graham and Faye, by the way, who I know are elsewhere now. But
Dingle.
You mention the distillery.
No, not this distillery. Hey. So, great question from Nick Husek. What are your guys' memories of doing the gathering tastings in Melbourne, Sid, other locations last year?
Well, happy and fond.
Yeah, happy and fond. Tiresome. There was so many going on. We held, I think, if I recall correctly, it was 13 events across 4 cities, and I did the Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and I didn't do Adelaide, but we did like the whole East Coast, and there was 2 events in Perth as well, which our fantastic state manager Jason did with us as well. That was fantastic. So the whole idea behind gathering, which we're hoping to obviously redo, but under instruction of when we can, was about bringing members together and having a great opportunity to drink some great whiskies in a full gathering format. But it's meant that we could also have some smaller events like the Brooklady night, like the Bricks night, but also some bigger ones like the Sydney gathering, Melbourne gathering. The Melbourne gathering was great. Of course, that was fantastic. The Sydney gathering was also great. They're all fantastic. But it was just, we're hoping to redo it, obviously. And everyone who came along last year, we hope to see you again this year. But it's all, of course, not up to us.
We'll see. Robert Akers has just said he's getting a coconut note, which again is just a classic bourbon cask American oak trait that you will get.
I agree with that. But not in a sickly way at all. Come on, Matt. Melbourne was way better. LOL. Nice try, Dom. I'm not going to be baited into that argument.
You've got a Melbourne passport, haven't you?
I do have a
passport. I do. I lived there for long enough. I qualify.
I do agree with AD. Water works. Water does this wonders, says Zeno. You know what? I'm going to take
time after you.
No, please.
After you.
Okay, fine. We could be here all night. I'm just going to add a tiny bit to this one, just a few drops, just to see how it holds up.
Wow. I tell you what, just as I added water, then you should have seen the oil separate. Big oily dram.
Ooh.
Hasn't made much difference to the nose.
Slightly more savory for me on the palate, though. In a good way. Like I really like almost a bit more industrial.
Yeah, definitely. Chewy whiskey. That's a great one. Of the 3 we've had so far, that is a great one for the mouthfeel. Real textural experience.
Mark Garrow says the Bricks night was great. Never had so much rum. Yeah, me neither. It's a lot of rum in one hit.
The rum night we did with the boys from Quidden Time was before your time with us, wasn't it?
Just the year before.
Oh, that was, I can relate. We had another rum night a few years ago, and that was goes down the annals of great society night.
I've heard many stories about that rum night, and
it was brilliant.
The Bricks night was also, it's just a lot of rum, and I get that. It was sort of like, I think it was 7 or 8 rums all up. If you include the unaged agricoles and all sorts of weird things that we were tucking out of there, that was good fun. Of course, that was the launch of R13.1, which was fantastic. And members can expect another R13 in the pipe eventually, which would be good.
One of the rums we had at that Sydney tasting back when we did it with Quidden Time was one of the very early society rums that was bottled at 82%. And having an 82 ABV spirit at a tasting event gets things going pretty quickly. Normally, whenever you do a society event with cask strength whiskey, we tend to find the room can be very quiet and apprehensive at the start of the night. And by the time you get to about the 3rd dram of the night, people relax a bit more and the volume increases. And that one got things off to a flyer right from the start. It was a good night.
Ian says, don't put too much water in that 35, it'll kill it. I'll agree with that. I only put a drop in.
You always want to be careful, don't you?
Yeah. Especially with old, like I said, it's not ancient whiskey, but it's old. It's 23 years old.
But that standard rule applies. Always add your water drop by drop, because if it needs more, you can add it. But once you've flooded it, you can't take the water back out again. So you always need to be careful.
Rob says, so glad I got a bottle of this. Yeah, you know what? We did get a small allocation of bottles for each of these casks that came in, with the exception of the 33, which was an event-only exclusive. So those who scored a bottle, they were in the Christmas outturn last year, which was great. So the November, December issue, a lot of fun. Anything from your end over here? We need to...
Just some more comments about rum.
We're not drinking rum, just for the record. We're
Scotty at Oak Barrel, good to see you. You could nose that all night, couldn't you? That is such a, and whoever said the bag of Allen's mixed or whatever, that is really coming through now.
Yeah, whoever that was, sorry, I missed who it was, but it was an Allen's Party Mix comment. That's bang on for that one.
This distillery, by the way, is also now doing some peated campaigns each year. Have you tried their peated spirit yet?
I have. I've tried one. It was a core range bottling.
Yeah.
This distillery.
Yeah. It was really good. Very, very, very good peated whiskey for a Speyside mainland distillery.
Seeing a bit of that lately.
Well,
really good peated whiskey come out of the Highlands and Speyside again.
Look, it's flavour of the month, isn't it? Everyone's jumping on board. If you like your peated whiskey, well, there's only 8 or 9 distilleries on Isla that are going to do it for you, and so the mainland distilleries are trying to cash in on it. And I say cash, you got to remember, in order to have 10 or 11-year-old peated whiskey now, they had to think about this 10 or 11 years ago. So it's actually in the early 2000s to 2010 that a lot of those distilleries jumped on board and started doing their peated campaigns now. And we're now seeing those casks come to maturity now. Of course, Edredale started doing it ages ago. No surprise though, because and that was because their distillery manager they poached from Lefroy, so he didn't know any better.
Well, you've got to produce peated whiskey. Thanks, Dave Phillips. I really appreciate it. I'll take you up on that. He said that a big shout out to Matt for getting this pack to us after we messed up the order. I'll keep a large dram of the Dallas Dew for you. Thanks. It's very nice of you. Thank you. 62%, that's up there with HS 1.1. My favorite society cask, HS 1.1. Obviously, no names, but I did get a number of messages that day saying, how do I order? Is it online? Is it ready yet? Sorry, guys. It was an April Fool's prank. That was a good, I like that one, though. And Todd's trying to bait you and says, sorry, which distillery, Andrew?
Yeah. Keep trying
that. Yeah, nice try, mate.
Barbara says Ben Romick do a lovely peated too, which they do. So there are some Speyside / Highland mainland distilleries that are making some fantastic peated whiskey. And this distillery is now in that club as well.
Even distilleries like Ardmore.
Well, they've long been doing it.
Pretty much only do peated, yeah.
Well, sorry, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they've always had a reasonably peated base spirit.
Yep.
I guess we're talking about distilleries that are known for one style and do a small campaign for a short period of the year.
Yeah.
So Ardmore, from memory, peats to 14 parts per million?
Actual ppm, I can't recall.
Take it for me, it's 14. But whereas, other Speyside distilleries that are typically 3 to 5, and then for a short period of the year, they ramp it up to 35 or 40. Or in the case of Ben Romick that's been mentioned, 67, I believe, was their ppm.
Yeah. Which is
for their peated campaign.
Yeah, for their peated campaign, yeah. That is lovely.
That's a treat. We shouldn't overlook that. You don't drink 23-year-old whiskey every day. Certainly from a first world bourbon barrel that's this good.
Todd says Glendronach do some limited peated runs. That's true. A lot of distilleries do a peated run each year. It's a number of days or weeks of the year that they run the stills with peated spirit. Like Balvenie Peat Week. Yes, exactly, Dom. That's correct as well. Mark says the core range from this distillery have to be the cheapest single malts you're going to buy in Australia, surely. They're up, they certainly are very close to being, I'd say.
In their classic range.
In their classic core range.
They've got a large portfolio, and there's certainly a list of bottlings at the lower end that are incredible bangs for your buck. But then you can also go up to their 25-year-old Portwood finish, which has got a decent price tag. So they've cornered all ends of the market, absolutely.
Mark says none of the first 3 drams improved per se for me with water. Okay. Each to their own.
It's a subjective thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
Martin says, empty glass with the 35 lovely coconut notes. Yeah, absolutely.
Good call.
And Craig says, Glenfiddich make a peated bottling. It was ... good for making Christmas cake. I'll just leave that one there.
I actually, I'm old enough to remember the Glenfiddich that got bottled in an ex-Isla cask, which was the Kaoran.
Glenfiddich.
Glenfiddich, yeah.
Yeah,
You heard correct.
Kaoran.
It's going back a bit. That came out in about 2003, silver label.
Yeah, right. Oh, I think I know the label. I've never seen it really.
Water?
I'm okay.
Okay.
All right, how are we all going? Aaron, remember that. Wasn't their best work, says Eva.
You are correct, Martin. It wasn't, was it? Well, the trouble is they advertised it as, you got to be careful what you advertise. It's a bit like, I'll come back to the second, Martin. It's a bit like distilleries that put Pedro Jimenez on the label. The moment you say it's from a PX cask or you mention PX, people expect to taste it. And I know why you're giggling.
No. I'm not going to say anything.
So the moment you put PX there, people go looking for it. And if they don't find that rich sherry, they're going to be disappointed. And it was the same with that Glenfiddich bottling. They mentioned Isla. They said peated cask. People went looking for smoke and it wasn't there. We've gone off topic a bit. But,
you did write about this recently, didn't you?
Probably. I've written a lot of stuff recently.
No, like as in like Whiskey and Wisdom wrote about the expectations of seeing PX on a label.
Oh, but it's a bugbear of mine. Yeah. There's a lot of distilleries now and independent bottlers putting out fairly mediocre spirit and they're finishing it in a PX cask for 1 month or something like that. So they can put PX on the label and then everyone jumps out and runs to buy it and they don't get the PX hit they're expecting because we made a joke about one whiskey where we think it might have just been put next to a PX barrel.
The release was called Whiff of PX.
Whiff of PX. If you use your imagination. Yeah. What a lovely drop. I can see why you do like that distillery, Matt. That is a lovely, lovely drop.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons I like that distillery personally. It's again a bit like Distillery 64. It's got such diversity across different age statements and different casks, but also the fact that it's that sandbox years of their Glenmorangie ownership. It was this marvelous era of interesting experimentation as well. So yeah, there's so much to love about Distillery 35, which neither Andrew or I said the name of the distillery. So that's got to be a win, I guess.
I'm going to shout out to Mark Garraway, who has got the most excellent glass swirling technique. I've just been watching it here, mate. You're doing it well. That is beautiful.
And a fair lockdown beard going as well. That's big shout out, mate. You're doing it right. Okay, so let's move on to dram number 4.
Number 4. Yeah. Now, prepare yourself. Brace yourself. We've got a big one coming. Oof. So number 4, it fits into the society's flavor profile as deep, rich, and dried fruits. And this is an absolute bruiser. It is a belter of a whiskey. It's only 7 years old. Anyone who says something that's 7 is not ready yet is on the wrong track. This is a massive whiskey. Comes in at a huge ABV of 67%. Lots of colour there.
Lots of colour
for its relatively youthful age. And this one slaps you around the cheeks in a very good way.
Welcome back, Jose. Good to see you all. Rob says he put the lid back on the 35 glass and there's a lovely whiskey mist.
Mist?
Like the condensation mist kind of thing going on there. That's cool.
Mark's made a comment here. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So that distillery, we've got to call it that distillery now because this is this distillery, but that distillery has had a massive amount of marketing put in it. It was bought out by a French firm. When did they buy that now? 2000 and something. And they've got a big shiny distillery, and they want to maximise it. So they're putting a lot of expressions out as a result.
If anyone on Zoom wants to ask a question via audio or via video at all, of course, please just hit the little hand icon so we can see if you, or just wave to your camera, and we can go from there. But in the meantime, we'll keep pressing on. But of course, you can ask questions in the Facebook chat, in the Facebook group as well. For those who've just joined in, and I've seen a few more numbers join in here and there. It's Matt Bailey and Andrew Derbidge from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here in Australia, taking you through the gathering live tasting, the virtual tasting, as we promised we would tonight on the Monday, the 20th of April. Time flies. So this is...
I hope you can tell us apart, by the way. That's Matt. I'm Andrew.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, yeah.
He has hair. I can pronounce heresy correctly.
I've already been pulled up on that like 3 times. I said heresy. I know. I got it wrong. I'm very sorry. I meant to say heresy. I got it wrong, yes. And I've been called out on that now.
I wasn't aware.
I didn't realize you were going to call me out as well. You know what? Fine. You know what? I'm never drinking a heresy bottling again.
I didn't know you'd been called out.
I've been a number of times
for a long time.
A number of times.
God. I'm sorry.
No. I said it wrong like twice in a stream. I get it. You know what? That's fine. We all make mistakes.
It was the only 2 I watched. That's all.
Yeah, great. Mark says, question, gents. I've received many virtual tasting packs recently. It is interesting the SMWS one is using only using plastic bottles. Clearly, there are no concerns with storing high ABV drams in plastic.
Not for short periods of time.
No. Not for short periods of time. And these were bottled up in 2 batches. So there was a batch bottled up back in August for September delivery, and there was a batch bottled up in December. So they haven't been sitting in plastic for a very long, and they're very sturdy little bottles. So I don't think there's any problem there. They are through their GE pack, as they call. They're through Dram Team. They know what they're doing. So I don't think there's any concern there. Dom says, does not drink like it's 67%. Finding it very smooth, pleasing on the palate, and giving on the finish. Gotta love a persistent whiskey. You know what? That's a good phrase. That's a fantastic word.
You got us going there. Persistent. Yeah. Lovely word.
It's like it's a whiskey that will keep cutting through over and over. Here we go.
Great comment from Sebastian here too. 67% is a true coronavirus killer.
Yeah, actually that is true. If you want to rub a little bit of this into your palms, this will act as a hand sanitizer. It is 67%, so do your worst.
There's a bit of, to be fair and to be serious for a moment, which I don't often get, there's a bit of alcohol prickle to overcome to get down to the true aroma of this. As I smell that, it's not leaping out of the glass with aromas in the same fashion that its predecessors were. Mm. And I think you've got to cut through that alcohol a little bit. And we know from last time around that a little bit of water will help do that.
Craig Morton says, really mature for 7 years. Great complexity. Yeah, I've not tasted it just yet, but the nose for me, I have. The nose for me is like pure vegetable soup.
Yeah,
that sort of very savory kind of. It's a much more savory sherried experience rather than that usual sort of quite sweet sort of fruitcake kind of sherried experience. Or
very stock.
I agree also with just the stock. It's stock, mate.
Stock. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'd said to you prior to tonight and but without any prep, what age statement would you expect an average typical society bottling to have to fit into the deep, rich and dried fruits? You would not pick a 7-year-old, would you?
No.
I know deep, rich and dried fruits for me, I just instantly picture something in its late teens, early 20s, typically from a sherry cask or something. A 7-year-old, no, would not have picked that.
It is big though.
You got your cheek, that's it?
Yeah.
What are we saying about the second fill toasted butt?
Second fill toasted butt. Let's examine that a little bit.
Oh, it's a finish. Sorry, I'd forgotten that. After 5 years in an ex-bourbon hogshead, this whiskey was transferred into a second fill toasted oak butt.
This distillery.
Yes.
This is actually one of those distilleries that has had a recent resurgence of core range. So it's a distillery where the core range. One. Well, I mean, it does now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It didn't for a long time, and then it did, and then it didn't again. Now it does again. in that order.
Changed its style, by the way, too. That's something that's worth saying. So this changed hands in 2000 and was it 14 or 16?
14.
14. So this was actually distilled under the previous regime, and it's worth saying that the previous owners deliberately made this a very light spirit. It was deliberately distilled and made to be a light spirit. New owners, when they took over, completely changed that to turn it into a more robust, bigger spirit. They changed the fermentation times. They're changing it to be a very fruity spirit. So this is probably the last chance you'll get to taste this right at that threshold point where it changed. So bottlings and distillates from this distillery that are older than this will have come through when they changed the fermentation and changed the very character of the distillery. Which is interesting, isn't it? If you think about buying a distillery and you're buying everything that is the goodwill and the reputation and the style that it's known for, to then change that is a very big call.
It sounds like almost like a bad decision to make, but
a brave decision.
A brave decision.
I wouldn't call it a bad one.
But yeah. If you're buying something for what it represents, where it sits in the market, what its style is, and then to completely have the decision to change that is quite interesting.
Yeah. Mind you, when you're dealing with Mr. Walker, you're not going to question his decisions too often, are you? That's Billy Walker, by the way, not Johnny Walker, just to be clear.
Billy Walker, who now operates this distillery, sold his Glendronach, Glenglassaugh, Benriach empire to Brown-Forman and then bought this.
And that 67% really delivers, doesn't it?
A Christmas dram, if I've ever had one, says Joel Rinaldi. Absolutely. 30.94 is only 9 years old and the same flavor profile. There you go. And Ian Scott says cinnamon Christmas cake on the nose. Taste will probably improve with some water. Very impressive dram. Sorry, there's a few comments coming in.
It's funny. Sorry, just while you read those, there's a couple of comments there that you would normally associate with a sherry cask, with sherry maturation, Christmas, cinnamon and the like. And this is not a sherry cask. So that's interesting that the people have made that connection.
It's a toasted butt. It's a second fill toasted butt. It's got the size, but not the previous usage. Ross Anderson. Hello, Matthew and
Ross. Good to see you, mate.
Nick,
Cheers, Ross.
Nick says, I visited this distillery last year. They gave the most generous drams of anywhere I went in Scotland. That sounds dangerous. And
well, I regularly jog past this distillery.
Oh, when you're over?
Regularly, when I jog there in that part of the world. So yeah. I also stay at the Dowans Hotel, and if you leave the Dowans, go out the back door, up the road and turn to the right, you actually pass this distillery.
Oh, there you go.
It's about, I'm going to guess and say 700 metres from the distillery. By the road, probably 300 metres as the crow flies.
Craig says, I regularly think about buying a distillery.
Oh, don't we all? I regularly think about winning lotto too, but...
So, and Mark asks, so this 107 dram is well and truly pre-Mr. Walker? Well, it's a 7-year-old whiskey, so yes.
Well, it was 7-year-old when it got bottled last year in 2019, which means it's 2012 distillate.
So yes, at least 2 years before the sale of the distillery.
Before the buyout. Tim's asked an interesting question here. When they change hands, are the blenders taught how to replicate the old version, or do they need to start again?
That's a cool question.
That's a great question, isn't it? Well, I mean, you can only work with what you've got. When you change the fermentation, and you're therefore changing the very, very character of the beer you brew, and therefore the spirit you're going to get, I don't think you can muck around too much to replicate it. When you say blenders, I assume you mean the blenders who would buy this as a third party. I think at that point you've got to say, okay, well, we can't go to this distiller anymore. We've got to find that flavor profile from something else in the portfolio.
Yeah. Two comments here. Hessian sacks on the nose too. Unusual, as I've typically only had that kind of note with peated whiskies. That's an interesting comment from Todd there.
Yeah, I can get his Hessian sack.
And their current labeling, mainly the font, looks a little bit cartoonish for me. just doesn't quite fit in with the brand, with the rest of the brand.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think
their labeling is very low grade.
Well, you go to the marketing department these days and you say, well, we need this product to stand out on an increasingly crowded shelf. And when you go to your bottle shop now and there's now 80 brands and labels to choose from instead of 20 or 30, some distilleries are just having to do something to look different, to stand out, and on the back bar as well.
This distillery, Alecky, sounds very similar to number 2.
Yeah, righto.
Alecky and Alecky. Yeah, there you go. I've got away with not saying it. Off topic and not concerning the distilleries tonight, but I've got myself a 29-year-old Benriach Glenlivet purely for the fact it was distilled in my birth year, 1986. Just wondering your guys' thoughts about Benriach at this time before Billy Walker.
Oh, can I answer that? I had a really good conversation just a couple of weeks ago with mental blank. Who's our friend there? Guy that was still there for ages.
Sorry, which distillery?
At Benriach.
Pre-Billy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's your department.
Mental blank. Sorry, mate. It was not a highly thought of distillery at the time. It was often overlooked. If you can remember the official bottling that came out at the time, the 10-year-old in the blue carton, wasn't considered a great whiskey. One of the reasons when Billy Walker's Mob bought it out, you might recall they spent a lot of time having to re-rack a lot of their spirit into other wine casks and finishes to try and put some sparkle into it. So it wasn't that highly regarded at the time, I'm sorry to say. Stuart Buchanan, that's the name I was trying to think of. Stuart Buchanan.
He still works at Benriach.
As a brand ambassador.
Yeah, as a brand ambassador.
He was actually producing at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is probably why they didn't worry about changing the character of the spirit.
No, they probably didn't. No.
1986 was a rough time for the industry. I mean, 1983 was when things really went south, and that downturn, that real, dare I say, depression era from 83 to, they were still closing distilleries in 86. So yeah, not a good time to be a distiller.
No. Which is why if you were born between 81 and 86 and you're hunting birth year bottlings, I've got some bad news for you. They're either really expensive or not very good. You know what? I've not added any water to that, but I'm still enjoying it. At
I haven't added water either, come to think of it.
I'm going to try a little bit of water in that.
It fits well into the flavor profile that we've given it. It is deep, it is rich, and there are dried fruits.
Yeah, absolutely. Julian Viard, good to see you, mate. Hey, hope you're well, mate.
Ryan's tuned in at a very opportune time. I won't read out his comment here, but oh, sorry, mate.
Hi, Ryan. Good to see you, mate.
I'll try and say something more highbrow next time. Any good structural engineer knows what the smell of a Hessian sack is like, because we lay wet Hessian on concrete when we pour it.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Am I passing that water?
No problem at all.
Cheers. So there's 107 really sweetens up on the nose after sitting for a while, says Mark.
It does. Good observation, Mark. It's getting sweeter as we go.
I added a drop of water and it got quite a bit sweeter as well, but still didn't lose that vegetable soup note that I quite like, actually.
Mark, you've prompted me to make a comment there, and we've stumbled across it. That's something to be said about these whiskies that are high in alcohol, certainly at 67%. There are a lot of volatiles there that will evaporate and give off over time. So the higher the ABV, the more you would expect a whiskey to change with time in the glass. And I've been saying this about Society whiskies now for 15 years. That's just a universal truth. You get 2 drams for the price of 1. You pour a whiskey at cask strength and you can enjoy it for what it is straight away on the spot. And if you let it sit for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, it will change over time as those volatiles give off and change and oxidize and all those things. So certainly the higher the ABV, the more you would expect to see change over time.
Zeno says, Andrew, can we talk about how 81 to 86 was a bad time and how it will impact people, how it impacted people, and how in the distillation versus how issues would impact 2020 to 2022?
Wow. Okay. Well, there's a difference in market. To go back to the 80s, the product fell out of love. There wasn't a consumer market for it. People weren't, and let's just go one step back further again and acknowledge that that was the era of blend. There was not really a big single malt market as we know it today. So the whiskey was selling, but it was selling 99% of it was Johnny Walker and Dewar's and Famous Grouse and all the blends. So when people stopped buying blends, the bottling company stopped putting in orders, and so the single malt distilleries stopped producing, and that was all caught up in that downturn. We're living in very interesting times at the moment, and there's obviously restrictions on production at the moment, but it's happening within an environment where the product is still popular. There is still a huge, booming, growing single malt market. And we've explored already tonight a couple of distilleries that used to not be known as a single malt and now actually due to the growth in the category and the fact that they can now survive as a single malt brand, whereas once upon a time, 100% of their output was for the blenders. So very hard to sort of compare eras in the context of the fact that right now, single malt is still a very popular product. The consumer knowledge about it is massive. Go back to the 80s, very different beast.
I think it's incomparable. It's not really this. We're talking about different scenarios of, as Andrew said, different scenarios of popularity. But great question.
Very good question.
Yeah.
If I was giving a tasting in Sydney, you'd get a prize bottle for that.
Interesting comments. Andrew says, Ian, I've completely lost the Christmas cake nose on it on the 107, but still an excellent tasting and full flavored dram.
Ian, just do me a favor. If you've got a glass of water nearby, have a big sniff of your water and have a glug of it, and then go back to your dram and tell me if that Christmas cake comes back or not.
Yeah.
And we'll all wait while you do it.
Big shout out to everyone who's in the Zoom tonight with us. Fantastic. Great to see you all in here.
Rob Akers, good to see you. I can see you getting comfy there. Possibly not with audio connected yet.
No. Yeah, I think his audio dropped out there. Adrian, good to see you. Matt, good to see you. Sam Lucardi, hope you're well, mate. Hope you're well. Absolutely, mate. Oh, that looks like something a little bit more tropical than most. There you go.
Yeah, Negronis.
Negronis, there you go. Okay. And a big shout out to everyone. We'll open the Zoom up to some questions in just a moment. Of course, Ian says, nope, my nostrils are completely shot.
and we did say that at the start. This is a big whiskey. It's a belter. And I remember when you and I encountered this a year ago, or last year, I should say, we had similar reactions. It was a big in-your-face one. And we had it earlier on in the tasting. We'd swapped this one with its predecessor and had it earlier on, and it took a bit of time to recover from it.
There's a great question from Joel Rinaldi here who says, you find some whiskies that are high ABV that are easily drank without water, whereas some need water. I've had a 71% that requires zero water and some much lower ABV that definitely need water. What's the reason behind this?
Oh, can I jive in there?
Yeah. Well, I think we're both going to answer for this, but it might be the same answer. But you go ahead.
Okay. Seal your answer in an envelope.
No, I'm good.
Well, my take on it is that it comes down to the volatiles in the spirit and where they take their cut, and how much of the cut dips into the faints and the fusel oils and things like that. And so you can have some very aggressive alcohols in the 4-shots end as well. So it really depends on that middle cut and how pure the ethanol is that they're taking. That, for me, reflects on how clean and how clean that spirit is and how drinkable it is. Sometimes it's those high ABV ones that have got that clean spirit you hardly even taste. Whereas the ones that still are up at the high end towards the 4 shots or are dipped too far into the faints can be very aggressive still.
Yeah.
Same answer?
That's half of it.
Oh, okay.
No, the other half I would say, I would completely agree with everything he just said. The other half of that, however, I say is integration of spirit and oak. And I truly believe this, where you get these casks that are just not interacting with the spirit well, and they create a hot profile across the spirit base.
Australian whiskey.
Oh, not all. Sorry. I can't even edit this. This is live. Okay, look, this is great. But he's right though. But it's there's a lot to be learnt there, of course, and everyone's learning from these. I can't wait for the comment section to blow up on that one. You know what? That's great. Thanks a lot. No, but like this is kind of the issue that there's the cask integration against the spirit. You end up with these whiskies that are overly saturated casks that get these extremely high ABVs where it just tastes hot. And that's a lot of the tannins from the cask speaking out. And therefore, any discussion about fusel oils and it becomes redundant because they're all just being soaked anyway. It becomes a waste of time. Yes. Okay. I can. Yes. You know what?
Sorry.
You know what, Joel? That can of worms. No, you don't need to apologize. That can of worms, of course, is actually a can of worms. Okay. So,
but Morsey's made a wonderful comment here. Burn is not ABV related. It's structural.
Yes. That's a very good. That's a very good
point.
response. Yeah, it is structural. It's a multitude of factors, of course, that contribute to that. The spirit factor that Andrew touched on, the cask factor, of course, as well. And I think that once they meet right in the middle, as I've said before, they create this harmonious balance of where you can get a whiskey that is 71%, as Joel said, that doesn't need any water and it drinks so well. You remarked on this the other week about saying how these high proof whiskeys that are 70 or might be high 60s. But drink like they're 50. There's that magic moment you get.
Yeah.
The 64's nose is now nothing at all after nosing the other ones. Yeah, that can happen, Dom. You know, like if you're going back to a light and delicate, where the spirit is sort of maybe even leave it for 20 minutes after this and come back to it then. It'll change again. That's the magic of it. Ian says not all Australian whiskey, and of course all these other Australian whiskey comments.
Not all Australian whiskey.
Look, it was just God. Okay. Look,
Jeff, line drawn. No, come on, mate. Anyone who's been following what I've said for 20 years, I'm a big champion and fan of Australian whiskey.
Yeah, no, we both are. And
it was more of an in-joke between Matt and I after an experience we had earlier this year.
Yeah, that was this year, wasn't it?
It was this year.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Before everything, before the apocalypse. Shall we move on to dram number 5?
We shall. In fact, I've just rinsed
my glass. That's all right. Yeah, you're all good. Yep. I prefer the Murray. I don't know what the Murray is. You mean the 35? Ah, yes. Excellent. If you could try Matt's trick, go back and try and smell the glass with the 35. Incredible nose. Yeah, take your time with that 35. If you've got a spare glass, pour it into that. Use that glass for your 35. I think that'll work out quite well. Craig says, I have gone a separate Zoom with a few associates so we continue talking without interfering. Thanks, Craig. I really appreciate it. I didn't mean to mute everybody. It was just a chance for us to take some questions as we go, but we'll unmute everyone in Zoom so we can take some live questions in just a moment as well.
Jeff, just to follow that production point, Jeff says how the still is run has an impact on how fierce it is. And that was my point exactly. Yep. How you run your stills, where you take your cup points, how much reflux you encourage, all those things. Absolutely. We are on to number 5 in our peated flavour profile category, Distillery 33. We just got through 2 whiskies without mentioning their name. We'll see if we can make it 3 in a row.
This has to be probably one of the most iconic and I'd say cult following of distilleries in Islay.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because it got its reputation as a cult distillery at the time when it was very hard to come by and when it had a period of a pretty dismal period. It's now been up and running for 23 years. It's out of that, and people still refer to it as having a cult following, but that cult it had was a cult for the whiskies from the 70s and for its small little run in the 80s.
Which it still trades off.
It trades off, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about cult distilleries from Islay. I mean, it's very hard to go past Lagavulin.
True.
Which was the first Islay whiskey for many, many people. It's just had that huge campaign with Nick Offerman, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still, he's up there, still seen as a benchmark Islay whiskey. So I think it's interesting, your comment there. I tell you what, this is certainly a distillery that Lefroy trades on the love it or hate it reputation. This distillery certainly seems to split the whiskey community. And there's a lot of people who I think have issues with the brand rather than with the spirit.
Can of worms again. Yes. No, I don't.
Hey, you asked me to come around to your place to talk all night. I'm gonna.
No, I don't disagree. It's like, it is true though. It's like, I have issues with the brand.
Yes,
I do. But I love their spirit.
Undoubtedly.
Love their spirit. In fact, Andrew co-hosted a whiskey dinner with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society late last year, which was with Franz Schurer at Bentley Restaurant. And the welcome cocktail was this distillery's new make with
that interesting liqueur Suze.
It's like an apple liqueur. That was the cocktail. I know what's the rule of thumb for a cocktail? It has to be 3 ingredients or more. This had 2. This is just new make, like literally distillery new make with Suze on top, and it was unbelievable.
Suze is orange.
Orange. You're right. But it's like orange, like an orange. I meant apple orange. Yeah. Fruit. I love 33. I love this distillery. I'm not overly enamored with the brand. I'm enamored with the spirit, the quality of the spirit that comes out. And when we featured this particular cask at the gathering last year, Andrew poured a shifty on everyone in the room at Sydney and poured the 10. I almost said it just then. Pulled the 10-year-old age statement whiskey from this distillery, the core range 10-year-old, as the whiskey. And everyone was enjoying it. It's like, oh, that's not the real whiskey. And then we brought out this one, which is also a 10-year-old age statement, single cask strength, sitting at a healthy 59.8%. How lucky it is we get opportunity to drink these.
Oh, this is gorgeous. I mean, I'm one of the few people. I love this distillery, and I'm one of the few people that actually loves the brand. I love.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say that. I do love the brand. Can you scroll? Dominic made a comment that's just gone off the screen for a little bit, and I actually liked Dom's point. Its multinational owner is taking it from cult distillery to Disney. Maybe harsh, as I still love it, but that's interesting. That's the sort of
I get it. Yeah.
That they're getting out there.
What's the theme of this distillery day this year? Something black.
Yeah, well, I've actually tasted this distillery's release this year.
Yep.
It was a lovely drop, by the way.
I have too. It's fantastic. It's a lovely whiskey. Suze is a bitter aromatic made from
gentian
root. Oh, sorry. To me, it's very savory. Yeah, no, that cocktail was very savory. Some of these comments coming in from over here on Facebook.
Oh, sorry, I've got to look left.
No, that's all right. That's all right. We've got this. To further open the can of worms, I do agree with Andrew's opinion regarding Australian whiskey. 71% was an Australian whiskey, though. When is the SNWS can of worms bottling coming out?
Oh, we had can of worms. That was 78.24 from memory.
Nick, soon. I know I probably said that for the last 3 years. There you go. 80 loves 33 with his whiskey and wisdom isolation photo.
Yes, that's true. Oh, yeah, well done.
That is true. Yes.
God, people stalking me.
Interesting. I found the nose ordinary, but the palate great. Okay.
And on this one, what we're having right now?
I think he's referring to this one. Great nose, no palate, he says. Okay. Some people are saying the nose and the other way
Ian's
around.
comment,
Yeah,
is it?
in
Okay.
response to Craig's. Yeah, and the 33137 tastes better than the cask strength I had at Dramfest.
Sorry?
This one tastes better than the cask strength at Dramfest. Was there a cask strength 33 at Dramfest?
Nick, were you in the masterclass with Brendan? If you can just follow up and let me know that, and then I'll know what you're referring to there.
Yeah, it was that. It was that, guys.
That was the one? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one.
Wow, okay. Interesting. I thought
It
that
was great, though.
were fantastic. Big, they were very big, and the ABV was high as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's a very meaty palate, that one.
For those of you who actually, whether you like this distillery or not, I'd be keen to know if you're familiar with this distillery, if you're used to having, say, the 10-year-old or some of the other expressions that you can get it at your local. How do you think this one compares with it? Because it's very interesting. There's been a lot of talk and chatter amongst some of the Facebook groups here in Australia about the fact that it's very difficult to get this distillery amongst the independents. It is, I think I've said it, it's very hard to get amongst the other independents. And in fact, the Society is one of the very few sources you can find casks from this distillery. And I'd be keen to get your thoughts on how you think this compares to what else is out there. And I think it's been brilliant. We bottled this last year, obviously. There's been some cracking casks
this year.
Yeah. and two more to come, I can tell you. Two, by the way, having just filled our order for a shipment coming up shortly.
Yeah, nice.
From some interesting casks as well.
Yeah,
not just first fill bourbon. So I'm always keen to see when you do get the chance to taste this distillery that's not an official bottling. How do you think it compares?
So from Mark, he says, I feel like most Peter Society whiskies, 53s, 66s, etc., are refill bourbon casks. I noticed this is the first fill. Would you say this is uncommon?
Not at all.
The end. Suzanne, we already.
Sorry. It's not uncommon for a distillery that focuses very much on its own brand. You mentioned 53. I mean, Carlila is still the big producer to the blends. For all the blends that need some smoke in their blends, Carlila is still the big producer. It's the biggest distillery on Isla. It's had another expansion. What are they up to now? They're over 5 million litres a year, aren't they? It's a huge one. So a lot of Carlila gets put into refill barrels because they don't need necessarily to put it into first fill for its own brand. Whereas this distillery, number 33, very much focuses on that.
Mark Teague says Distillery 111 was the Nick Offerman, wasn't it? Yes, Distillery 111 was Nick Offerman Distillery. There you go. This is quite different. Yeah, it's different from all the other 4 drams, that's for sure, because it's the only peated whiskey like we've had in the lineup tonight. And how does this compare to a thigh-slapping dram? Well, first of all, this is 2 years younger. It's a bourbon cask compared to a second fill sherry cask, and so it's a fair bit different. Obviously, it's picked up, and the idea behind this particular cask was that the thing I loved about this particular cask as well is that no branch was offered any bottles for sale.
Yes,
this was all shared. This was the whole purpose of the gathering, and what you're doing tonight with us is that the idea behind this was that we share this dram around with everyone. So we got, I think, 12 bottles of this in the country. Every branch got about the same. If you count up all the branches from Switzerland to Japan and everything in between, everyone got the same number of bottles. So the UK maybe got a couple more because they're a big branch. But they were able to actually then share it with all the members. There were no bottle sales of this particular cask at all. The idea was the gathering, which will happen again when we're allowed to, of course, which was scheduled for September this year.
Can you remind me the number of thigh-slapping dram? I'm sorry, I go by numbers, folks, not names.
138.
138, that's right.
Yes, 138. Whilst we're enjoying this, it might be a good opportunity to say that we've got a special announcement coming out tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, which is a bit of a sneak preview of what's coming next month. So we have another live tasting. I think it's scheduled for the 29th of May. You'll have to check that. Dates
30th, I think, isn't it? May 30th?
I think it's the day before that.
Day before, sorry.
Yeah.
Shut up, Andrew.
I think it's 29th. And it's It's the festival tasting, which you'll know all about tomorrow morning, which we're really excited to announce for everyone. A few drams in that lineup, of course, from all the festival bottlings that we're getting into Australia, which is really exciting. Joel says,
that's a great comment from Joel.
The standard 10-year-old is like chewing on a 20-year-old cray pot rope, whereas this actually has some flavor and character. I'm not going to disagree with you, but I quite like the 10-year-old, but I think this is 10-year-old on steroids. This is fantastic. Any questions coming in from the Zoom group? I'll hit unmute all on these for a moment.
Can I go first?
Yeah, who's in for this one?
Mark Arroway.
Mark Arroway, you're up first. Hold on, there's a bit of noise in the background here. Yeah, who's in for this one? Mark Arroway, you're up first. Okay, there's a bit of feedback coming in here. Sorry, I don't know what's happening there. I might do this is working plan. Mark, how about you unmute yourself there, and we'll go from there.
All right, are we all good?
Yeah, we're good. Now we're good. There's someone using speakers, so we're getting some feedback. Go ahead.
Cool. Andrew, question for you if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When we were speaking earlier about some whiskies that are higher in proof yet taste as though they are lower in proof, and lower ones in proof they taste as though they're quite harsh.
Yep.
You mentioned a phrase where you said that might be in relation to when they do the cuts and that dips into the faints.
Yes.
Could you just elaborate on that? I wasn't too sure what you meant.
Okay, so when the still is when the beer is in the still and we've lit the fire underneath, and it's the alcohol that starts to evaporate before the water does, and so the first lot of alcohols that climb up and come over into the line arm and get condensed, what we call the foreshots, and they're very high in methanols as opposed to ethanol, and so distilling is what used to be called fractioning in the old days, and you would fraction the whiskey into the three pieces. So you had your foreshots, which were those early methanols, then the heart of the run, and you'll sometimes call the middle cut or the heart of the spirit, and those cut points are different for every distillery depending on what they're trying to achieve, and you get to the point where as the alcohol drops down and you're collecting that middle cut, you reach a point where the faints, which is that third portion, has start to have some fusel oils in it, and can actually start to have some volatiles and some very bitter notes that are quite unpleasant. And so each distillery will choose its cut points where it decides to turn the tap, if you like, and start to collect it. That makes up their spirit and their character. So and it's different for every distillery, depending on what they're trying to achieve, how much they need to produce, the quality they're going for, and the character of their spirit. Isla whiskies and Peter whiskies will tend to go further down into the faints region than others. Spacesiders will keep it up at the other end, for example. Have I gone some way to answering your question there?
I guess, what does that physically look like? So once they distill, what does it then mean when they capture the cuts and the faints and the heart, as you said?
Well, the heart that they collect will go off to a holding vat and eventually get put into casks to be matured. The foreshots and the faints are then put into another receiving vat and mixed in with the next batch and redistilled again, and goes round and round in a cycle. Thumbs up.
While we're on that topic, can I ask a question about a similar topic, about the same topic actually?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, is it more than just temperature that they use to decide that? So has it got to do with temperature and density of what's coming off, or are they looking at more advanced analysis these days of actually what's coming off as they go?
It's purely by ABV, and there are density meters that measure that. In fact, all the Pernod Ricard distilleries have density meters that just automatically switch. So they'll be reading the flow, and they'll know that when it gets down to 72%, that's when they want to start collecting. and there'll be meters that keep on reading the flow coming through the condenser. And when it gets to say 66% or something, it'll switch off. And it's different for every distillery. At some of the old-fashioned distilleries that still do it the old-fashioned way, they'll be using the spirit safe to take periodic readings and doing it that way, and deciding when they've reached the cut point. And they literally turn a tap, and the spirit coming off will go from one container to another container as they choose to collect or discard.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian. That's an awesome question. Anyone else in Zoom want to ask any questions? Please go ahead. There's a good opportunity now to do so.
I've got a question, if I may, Matt.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So looking back at the original theme of the gathering last year, this was marking the 35th anniversary of the society, right?
No. Well,
it was part of the year of celebrations, wasn't it?
It was a year of celebrations. The gathering was a different concept. There was a 35th anniversary, which was a bunch of casks that were actually handpicked by Charlie McLean. The gathering, however, was a new concept that brought members together around the world and shared casks.
The 35 thing was the year prior, was it not?
Was it?
Oh, sorry, 35 was 20.
Yeah, because it was.
Yes.
Captain Maths over here. Anyway, looking back on the 35 plus years we've had of the society, what do you think's gone well? What would you do differently? And what do you think we're going to see change in the next 5, 10, 15 years of the society?
Ooh, that's an awesome question.
Grab a dram for that one.
Yeah. How long have you got? Andrew can probably remark more on the history of it, so go ahead.
What a big question. I assume everyone could hear that, could they? No matter what.
Yeah, no, everyone can hear that.
Everyone
That's great.
that?
Yeah.
What would we do differently? I don't know. How
Another logo change.
It's interesting when you are groundbreaking and forging new territory. Let's not forget that the society did stuff that had never been done before. So when you're making it up as you go along and doing what no one's ever done, it's very hard to be judged for how you do it. So
in that vein, there's a number of distilleries. You have to remember that their society were bottling single malts, not just single cask, but single malt from that distillery before that distillery were. Glenrothes is one. Brora is another one. I know there's more than a dozen, I think, actually, distilleries in that list of that. So on Andrew's point, there was groundbreaking happening then, just as there is now. If you look back to C1, single cask cognacs. I mean, look at A1. Look at like these. There's things that we're doing which have constantly pushed the envelope or changed the landscape of single cask whiskey and the community that it has. I
can tell you one thing I know was a huge regret by the society. At one point, they acquired a large number of sherry, not butts. What's that other size of barrel in sherry?
Pipes, hoggies.
No, keep going. It's a weird word.
Tons,
no.
Kildurkins.
Keep going.
Puncheons, barriques.
No.
Let's just say sherry casks.
Sherry cask. The society acquired a huge parcel of these brand new casks, sherry casks, and sent them out to a whole stack of distilleries to fill. And we gave them the distilleries. They sat in their warehouses for 8, 9, 10, 11 years. And then we bottled them and made them available. And I know in hindsight, we discovered that a lot of the distilleries we sent them to were the wrong distilleries. And they were trying to be different and new, and they sent a whole stack of them off to some distilleries where their spirit just did not gel well with those sherry casks. You know, had we sent it to the likes of Glenfarclas and Macallan and all the rest, we would have had some amazing drams. Some of them were absolute shockers, to be fair. They were still bottled because they were interesting things. And then the tasting panel deemed it interesting. Gorda, thank you. Sherry Gorda.
You know what? That's not me. That's Alex Morse texting me.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, mate. Gordas, sherry Gordas, yes. So we learned the second time round. A lot of those first fills got bottled. Response was mixed, and we sent them back out to distilleries to be filled a second time. And when the second fills came back, we chose our distilleries a little bit better, and there were some great results. So sorry, Robert, it was such a great question, but if I can think of one thing off the top of my head that I know the distillery regrets, that was one of them. Sorry, the society, not distillery.
In terms of future, however, Rob, there's a lot going on at the moment at the society in terms of a new distilleries joining, obviously, the coding system. Interesting different types of malts coming through, different types of rye, different types of things like that happening. And I think what we're still going to continue to innovate in that scene, which is what's exciting, and provide unique experiences to our members through those casks, which is what we're all about. I don't think there's anything other than that. I mean, there's a lot coming through. There's a lot of experimentation in different cask types. If you've seen things from core range distilleries where they proudly promote that it was finished in Russian ice wine casks or ex-Australian Shiraz casks, all of that applies. There's still experimentation happening on every level, which we'll see in due course, which is exciting.
Tim's asked a good question here. Are there particular FMSW eras, if we can use that term, that you have a soft spot for? All of them. They're all good.
Yeah, there's always something in every era.
Yeah,
there's always something.
Does he mean paper label era and plastic label era?
What is the era? Is the era?
Don't say the word paper label.
Is it the era about packaging? Is it the era of ownership? Is it the era of who was at the helm at the time? Is it the era of the whiskey manager? Ewan's doing a fantastic job at the moment. He was preceded by Kai, who did the job for a while, who was preceded by Simon, who was just preceded by our friend who now works at Royal Mile Whiskies. There's each person has put their own thumbprint on what was happening at the time. The era when it was a true society and co-op was an interesting era. The era under Glenmorangy's ownership, I think, did some fantastic and wonderful things. And let's not forget that had Glenmorangy not come in at the time, the society probably would have folded and gone under. And the era we're in now is really exciting with some incredible investment in cask development. So there's something for all of them. Yeah. Comment from Ryan. Matt, since Andrew's pretty good at answering questions, has he considered a career in whiskey? Would you like to answer? That was addressed to you. Would you like to answer?
Brian, that's enough, mate. Okay. There's been some great questions tonight. Unless anyone wants to pipe out, anyone else wants to pipe up in Zoom, or anyone wants to write anything in Facebook, we'll still be here. I think that just about wraps us.
Well, that was the fifth whiskey.
That was the fifth whiskey. I recommend spending a bit of time with that 33.137. I got the code right. Look at that. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in and being a part of it tonight.
Question, Matt.
Yeah, here we go. Sorry, who was that? Sorry,
Todd here.
Todd, good to see you, mate.
Likewise, Matt. Likewise, Andy. Just a quick question around the local Australian tasting panel.
This one's for you, Andrew.
Let's see that.
Can you talk us a bit through the process? Obviously, the society bottles and provides you guys with releases. Can you describe, I guess, how you go about choosing which ones are going to be for the Australian market? Does the panel have a slightly different collective palette to the UK panel? And does the Australian membership have a different preference, I guess, to maybe what the global membership might be?
Ooh, those are all great questions. Oh, he gets a prize at the Sydney tasting.
I've got nothing to say here. You go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. Let's clear up a misconception. The local tasting panel, as we often refer to it, and as we knew it as, is no more. We no longer get sent samples for our tasting panel to try and pick from. And I've discussed this previously. The way our bottling program runs at the moment, there just isn't the time for those samples to come out and to do that. So that tasting panel was in place from 2005 up till about 3 years ago, and doesn't operate that way anymore. The selection panel, if I can use that, is yours truly, pretty much. I get sent a spreadsheet and tasting notes to make our selections from. I have a good chat with my counterparts in the UK to get some parts on it, some take on it. Occasionally I'll rope Matt into the conversation and say, what do you think? So it's more a selection panel than a tasting panel these days. That's our current situation right now. I can tell you from our experience from the old local tasting panel days, yes, there is a very, very different Australian palate. Things that appeal to us do not necessarily leap out and appeal to UK palates. We used to find that stuff that the UK panel raved about, we were less enthused about, and vice versa. The other thing that was also an interesting observation was simply because of the different seasons. They'd talk about a summer whiskey and what was great at summertime when it was our winter. And that would often confuse us. And they would bottle things at a certain time of year and say, you must have this in February. And we'd be saying to them, guys, it's 40 degrees here. No one wants to drink that. So there was definitely a difference. And I think, and my observation over many years was that the Australian palate, and I'm being very general here, this is a stereotype, but I believe the Australian palate is a very well-educated, very well-developed palate. And at the risk of saying something a little controversial and perhaps unpopular, I think possibly a lot of UK palates less so. I think here in Australia, we grow up in a very cosmopolitan society. We're exposed to a lot of different cuisines as kids, as we grow up, and we all try different foods and drinks from many different cultures. I'm not sure that's the case in other areas, and that affects our palate and our development. Have I strayed into nasty territory there? I'm not sure, mate. But,
no, I don't think you have. I think it's a very fair assessment. And I think that I do believe that the UK palate is very different from the Australian palate.
Yeah.
In that what Australian members appreciate is also quite different from what maybe UK members appreciate. And that is very much seen. Nick Husick writes in Facebook, he writes, such great whiskies tonight. Better than any tastings I have run for friends so far. That's huge. That's huge, Dick. I really appreciate that. And Joel says, to be fair, their summer is the same as our winter. Also that as well. If anyone else wants to zoom in and jump up, otherwise we'll call it there for a night. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join in tonight, grab a tasting pack, grab a gathering kit, being a part of tonight's tasting. As you can see, it's now empty. It's now dead. And we've enjoyed these packs. We've killed them off, and that's the end of the gathering packs. Of course, the next pack, of course, we're going to be preparing in-house, which is the festival packs, which have been worked on quite fastidiously of late. So we've got some great festival bottlings: Highland Festival, Speyside Festival, Campbelltown Malts, Facial, all coming through in the next few. The announcement's tomorrow morning. I won't give away too much right now, but I really appreciate you tuning in. A big thanks to Andrew for joining me tonight on the nightly live, which has been. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure as always. And
we'll see you all tomorrow night. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your drams. Have a great Monday night, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Brilliant.